You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I am really excited because today is the long-awaited debut of two new semi-recurring segments. I'll get into them a little later, but I'm really excited about these. I think I'm going to have a lot of fun doing them. I think it's going to be really interesting to you, the person on the other end of the speaker. I hope you enjoy it. I have to start, though, with David Njoku requesting a trade. I have to say, I don't mind Njoku requesting a trade. You know I went off on Jamal Adams. Oh, what has the guy won? He's won nothing here. Blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. And the same holds true for Njoku. This guy has done nothing in the NFL. Was expected to take a big leap last year and didn't. Only played in 4 games, only started 1, and only caught 5 passes. But I understand why he's upset. The Browns went out and signed Austin Hooper to a big money deal in free agency. They also drafted Harrison Bryant in the 4th round. Njoku's a former first-rounder who got hurt. Everyone knows the talent he has. You can't take that away from him. And now he has to fight for his starting spot. That would upset me too. And even if I win, if I'm Njoku, I'm not getting a lot of run. What, you're gonna bench Austin Hooper? You just signed him to a big money deal. Harrison Bryant, you know, is gonna get some playing time. The writing is on the wall for Njoku. He knows he doesn't have a lot of playing time ahead of him in Cleveland, so yeah, he wants out. I don't begrudge him for that at all. If you want to call me a hypocrite for that, you can. I mean, you have to realize something. I don't root for the Browns. I root for the Jets. So, of course, I'm going to take a trade request from a player for my team more seriously than another team's trade request. That's just normal. I went through the 31 other teams yesterday, and I came up with 7 teams that I think would be good fits for Njoku. One team that's been mentioned is the Cowboys. I don't see that. They let Jason Witten walk so they can give Blake Jarwin the starting spot. Dalton Schultz is also slated for a big role. I don't think Njoku fits with the Cowboys. I think they have bigger fish to fry, namely Jamal Adams. Get that trade done soon, Joe Douglas, please. But the 7 teams that I came up with are the Bengals, Cardinals, Packers, Panthers, Patriots, Redskins, and Titans. The Bengals, their starting tight end last year was CJ Uzomah. He's really not that good. He only caught 27 passes last year for 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's not much of a blocker. His backup was Drew Sample. Sample's not a receiving threat. He is a good pass blocker, though, so Burrow will like him there. But the Bengals need to give Joe Burrow as many weapons as possible. And if a guy like Njoku becomes available, they need to pursue him. I think the Browns would be hesitant to trade him within the division, but if you're Mike Brown, you have to at least ask. Njoku would fit in perfectly with the Cardinals. He's not the best blocker in the world, according to Pro Football Focus. Njoku only had a 58.4 pass blocking grade and a 56.3 run blocking grade. You pair him with a blocking tight end, and you've got something. The Cardinals have one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL in Max Williams. In both pass blocking and run blocking last year, according to Pro Football Focus, he had a grade of over 82. He's not much of a threat offensively. He only caught 15 passes last year. So if you pair Williams with Njoku, that's scary. That gives Cliff Kingsbury endless options on how he's going to use his tight end. It makes a scary Cardinals offense that much scarier with the growth of Kyler Murray, adding DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk too, Larry Fitzgerald is still there. You add Njoku to that offense, that's scary. The Packers didn't give Aaron Rodgers any help this offseason. They didn't draft a wide receiver. The tight end they drafted in Josiah DeGuara, I don't think is going to be that good. Their starting tight end as it stands right now is Mercedes Lewis. He's 35 years old. He's nearing the end of the line. To add a player like Njoku would make Rodgers so much happier. He would fill the Jimmy Graham role from last year. He'd be used more than Graham was. It makes perfect sense to bring him in. You slighted Rodgers in the offseason by not helping him and giving him any wide receivers. You can help him by giving him a good tight end. Make no mistake about it. Njoku's a good tight end. He's not great. He's just good. The maximum I would give up for him would be a conditional 4th round pick. The Panthers lost Greg Olsen this offseason. He went to the Seahawks. They really didn't fill that hole. Their starting tight end is Ian Thomas. Thomas is a really good pass blocker, but he's not much of a threat offensively. Last year, he only caught 16 passes for 136 yards. I understand that Olsen was taking away most of those targets, but still, to add a guy like Njoku is an improvement over Thomas offensively. There's no way around it. He'd help out Matt Rule. I kind of like the idea of Njoku and Bridgewater playing together. I think that could work. I think him and Robbie Anderson could work. In the draft, the Panthers added all defense. This would give them a chance to add a quality offensive player. They'd be smart to pounce on it. The Patriots obviously traded Rob Gronkowski. They drafted 2 tight ends in Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene. They're kind of on the lower end of teams that I think would be interested in a guy like Njoku, because Belichick isn't going to draft 2 guys in the 3rd round and then not have them play. That's just not what Belichick does. But he signed Cam Newton. He's not going to throw this year away. If he can get Njoku for a song, he would pounce on it. No question about that. The Redskins, yes, as it stands right now, they're still the Redskins. Until they change their name, that's what I'm going to call them. I like the name Washington Senators. I don't like the Washington Generals. That just brings too much of an aura of losing. I understand that's all the Redskins have done, but if you're going to change your team's name, you don't want to change it to that. I've seen the name Washington Warriors thrown around a lot. That makes perfect sense to me. I like the alliteration there. But my vote would go to the Senators. But back to Njoku. The Redskins' starting tight end is Jeremy Sprinkle. He's okay. He's not great. He's not terrible. But just give Dwayne Haskins as much help as you possibly can. We all know they have a good wide receiver core with McLaurin, Harmon, Quinn, and now Gandy Golden. You add a guy like Njoku, granted they don't have a great player. The closest guy there is McLaurin, but I wouldn't call him great right now. I'd call him really, really good. But it looks a lot better than it used to. They're on the lower end of teams that I think could trade for Njoku, but I'd still keep an eye out for him. And the Tennessee Titans, Jonnu Smith had a really good year offensively for him, 35 catches for 439 yards and 3 touchdowns. They're on the lower end of teams also. If they want to get a little better offensively, they trade for Njoku. It's not a necessity. It's more of a luxury. They're a team that would only be interested in giving up a minimal amount for him, and I don't think the Browns would do it. I just thought I'd mention them as a team that I think could be on the outskirts of the Njoku sweepstakes. I think the first 4 teams that I mentioned are the most likely landing spots for him. The Bengals, Cardinals, Packers, and Panthers. It's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Okay. It's time for the superfecta. What is the superfecta? Well, you know how I did the trifecta, tri meaning 3? Superfecta is a horse racing term where you pick who's going to finish first, second, third, and fourth. So, I did trifecta, now it's superfecta. There's also going to be a new order to it, and I am going to start with something that I'm really excited about. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this, I promise you that. Decades of dumbass decisions! What is decades of dumbass decisions? Good question. There's a lot to explain here. If you go on my Twitter, @RealJacobValk, you will see a bracket with the 16 worst moments in Yankees history, the 16 worst moments in Islanders history, the 16 worst moments in Jets history, and the 16 worst moments in Nets history. What I'm going to do is, every day that I need to, when I need to fill time, and maybe even some days where I don't need to fill time, because this is something that should be done consecutively, I don't want to get started on this and then, take a few weeks off from it, and then come back to it. That just doesn't make sense to me. So, you may get it at the end of every show, I don't know, that's still up in the air. But what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go through the 1-16 matchups, then the 2-15 matchups, then the 3-14 matchups, etc., etc., etc. But it's important to note, do not read anything into the seedings. The seedings are done alphabetically. Why did I choose to do them alphabetically? Well, I came up with this list myself. I had some help with the internet and just doing some research, and the biggest help of all was Joe and Evan's Benigno bracket of pain. In late March to late April, maybe early May, Joe and Evan, the afternoon drive show on WFAN, did something called the Benigno bracket of pain, which was very similar to this. And they inspired me to do this. It's hosted by Joe Benigno and Evan Roberts. And if you don't listen to the show, Benigno has not had much success in his sports life when it comes to his teams. He roots for the Mets, the Rangers, the Jets, and the Knicks. Not a lot of success there. So what Evan Roberts, the Evan in Joe and Evan, decided to do was he made a bracket of the worst moments in Benigno's sports life. Now, the ultimate winner was the Charles Smith game because he's a Knicks fan. The runner-up was the Mike Scioscia game, Game 4 of the 88 NLCS. But that just gives you an idea as to how this is going to work. It's the most miserable moments. The way the Benigno bracket of pain was done, it wasn't done team by team like this. There were more Jets moments than there were Rangers moments, and there were more Mets moments than there were Knicks moments. I went a little differently. I wanted to do 16 Yankees moments. That's why they're in the number one quadrant. That's how the bracket is arranged. If you'll remember your geometry, you'll know the 1, 2, 3, 4 quadrants. So Yankees are in 1, Islanders are in 2, Jets are in 3, Nets are in 4. But a big shout out to those guys. I had a great time listening to them do this. I thought it was really funny. But back to the question at hand, why I did this alphabetically. If I seeded this, for lack of a better word, honestly, like what I think is worse and what's second worst, what's third worst, etc., it would be no fun. There'd be no upsets. You'd know who'd advance up until the Final Four. Where's the fun in that? Also, I haven't done this bracket yet. I've looked at it just to get a general idea of things, but I have not done the full bracket. Some of them are really obvious to me, but some of them are really hard. And I haven't done them yet. I have absolutely no idea who's going to win this thing. I have no idea what the Final Four is going to look like. So if I seeded it with what I think is worse and second worst and third worst, etc., it would be no fun. Doing this alphabetically was the only way to do it. Also, this has nothing to do with anything. I know you can hear that vibration outside. I have no idea what that is. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to get soundproofing soon in my office, but like I said, there's really nothing I can do about it. I'm sorry. I know you hear it. It's annoying to me too. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm really, really sorry. But regardless, I'm going to persevere through it. If you have any questions about what any of these moments are, tweet at me at RealJacobValk, and I'll be happy to explain them to you. You can also wait until I get to them in the first round. I'm probably not going to explain them in the second round as much, but definitely in the first round they will. I understand how some of them can be confusing. Realize, I was limited to what Microsoft Excel could do. I did not make this template, this bracket template that was found online. I did change, obviously, the title, the team names, and stuff like that. The reason why I kept the seedings in the first place was because how else am I going to do this? I'm not going to go, just pick one out of a hat and do it that way. No, there needs to be some structure, so that's why I kept the seedings there. I think that's it. If you have any questions, like I said, please tweet at me, at RealJacobValk. But without further ado, here we go. The 1/16 matchup on the Yankees side is the 1960 World Series versus the Willie McGee trade. The 1960 World Series, one of the biggest upsets in World Series history. The New York Yankees were better than the Pittsburgh Pirates. Everyone knows that, and they played that way in the series. The total amount of runs scored in that series by the Yankees more than doubled the total number of runs scored by the Pirates. If you want to know more about that World Series, listen to the second interview that I did with Wayne Stewart. We had a great time talking about it. Obviously, it had the Mazeroski home run, Yogi Berra watching it sail over the left field fence, Ralph Terry hanging a slider, Johnny Blanchard, the catcher. Really, really bad moment. The Willie McGee trade. Not too many people know this. Willie McGee was drafted by the Yankees, 15th overall, in the 1977 January secondary draft. He never made it to the majors with the Yankees as he was traded for Bob Sykes. God only knows how Whitey Herzog was able to swing that, as Willie McGee went on to win 1985 NL MVP. He was a 4-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glove winner, won the batting title twice, and was a key part in the Cardinals' 1982 World Series winning team. What happened to Bob Sykes, you may ask? Really good question. He never pitched a game for the Yankees. That's right. The Yankees literally gave away an MVP for nothing. They got nothing in exchange for this future All-Star. As bad as that was, the 1960 World Series is worse. McGee is just one player. The 60 World Series featured a whole host of bad moments. You have Hal Smith. You have Mazeroski. I mean, I could go game by game and give you missed opportunities that the Yankees had. The Yankees should have won that World Series, and they didn't. Moving over to the Islanders now, we have the 1989 to 1994 drafts versus waiving Martin Straka, the first of what will be many Mike Milbury gems. You may be asking why Mike Milbury isn't on this bracket directly. The simple fact is, and I tried this, if I had just put Mike Milbury, A, you'd have known who was going to be number one, and B, there wouldn't have been enough bad moments to go around. I mean, really the only two bad moments that I had to fill the Milbury spots were John Spano and the arena stuff. The Spano thing could have happened to any team, and the arenas are tough, but it's not as bad as some of these. I didn't have enough bad moments to choose from. Could I have said the 84 Stanley Cup Finals? Yeah, I guess, but it was the Oilers' time. Could I have said them getting destroyed by the Rangers en route to them winning the Stanley Cup in 94? Yeah, but again, they lost to the eventual Stanley Cup winning team. Believe it or not, it was actually easier to not put Milbury in by himself and just add a bunch of terrible decisions by him. You'll hear them all when the time is right. But back to the 89 to 94 drafts. These were 6 drafts that set the Islanders back about 30 years. In 89, the Islanders had the 2nd overall pick. They went on to select Dave Chisowski. Chisowski only played 126 games in the NHL, only scored 31 points. 3 picks after him, Bill Guerin was taken. 1990, Islanders have the 6th overall pick. They see a bunch of really good players go in front of them, and you'd think they'd be able to carry that momentum over. No, they took Scott Sissons. Sissons only played 2 games in the NHL, one of the biggest busts in NHL draft history. The pick after him, Darryl Sidor, was taken by the Kings. Darian Hatcher was taken after Sidor. Trevor Kidd was taken in that draft. Martin Brodeur was taken at the end of that round. So was Keith Tkachuk, Brian Smolinski. Bunch of different routes the Islanders could have gone. I jumped around a little bit there. Instead, they took Scott Sissons. 1991, Islanders have the 4th overall pick. They take Scott LaChance. In 819 games, LaChance only scored 143 points. 2 picks after him, the Philadelphia Flyers took Peter Forsberg. In 1992, the Islanders had the 5th overall pick. They took Darius Kasparaitis. Kasparaitis had a good NHL career, not worth the 5th overall pick, though. I was never a big Kasparaitis fan. I remember watching him play with the Rangers. The Islanders could have taken Corey Stillman. That would have made sense. Sergei Gonchar. Martin Straka. Kind of funny that they could have taken Straka and they ended up getting him anyway. It's kind of interesting how stuff like that works out. One thing I noticed about this, a lot of these moments flow into each other. And you'll see that as we go through this. 1993, the Islanders go on the magical run. They end up with the 23rd overall pick. And they actually get it right. They take Todd Bertuzzi. But the reason that I'm including Bertuzzi here is because Bertuzzi only played 2.5 seasons for the Islanders before he was traded along with Brian McCabe and a 3rd rounder that ultimately became Jarkko Ruutu to the Canucks for Trevor Linden. The Islanders traded away 3 good young players for an established veteran when they were nowhere near being competitive. One of the worst moments in Mike Milbury's tenure as GM. Oh, and don't worry, the end of Linden is further down on this list. 1994, the Islanders see Eric Lindros succeed, so they think they can do no wrong by taking his brother Brett 9th overall. Oh, how wrong they were, as Lindros only played in 51 games and scored 7 points. Some other players who the Islanders could have taken include Jeff Friesen, Matthias Oland, Ethan Moreau, and Dan Cloutier. It takes skill to mess up 6 consecutive drafts. but the Islanders did. And it actually kind of flows into waiving Martin Straka. Like I said, these events flow into each other. Straka was not an Islanders draft pick. He was picked by the Penguins in the 92 NHL draft. He spent some time with the Senators and then was traded to the Islanders as part of a really complicated 3-team trade that involved Kirk Muller. It's not worth getting into. All you need to know is that Kirk Muller was a really good player. The Islanders traded for him. He was miserable there. He never wanted to be there. And the Islanders were forced to give him away to the Maple Leafs in a really bad 3-team trade. But one of the pieces that they got was Martin Straka. They also got Brian Berard in that deal. And Berard had a good NHL career, not a great NHL career. Injuries ruined his career. But Straka looked like he was going to be something kind of special. In 22 games for the Islanders, he had 12 points, and realize, this was a miserable Islanders team. They went 22, 50, and 10. They only had 54 points. They were dreadful. John Pickett wasn't putting any money into the team. This was around the time of John Spano. I mean, a garbage team. But you can see that Straka has talent. Mike Milbury, less than 2 months after trading for him, puts him on waivers. He ends up being claimed by the Panthers. Now, granted, he doesn't do much for the Panthers. But then, in free agency, he signs with the Penguins, and he goes on to have 2 point-per-game seasons. One of the big pieces that the Islanders got for Kirk Muller spent less than 2 months on the team. How on God's green earth does that make any sense? As stupid as that decision was to waive Straka, it is nowhere near as bad as the 89 to 94 drafts. 6 players over 1. It's kind of easy to see that, and those 6 drafts really set the Islanders back a lot. You can make the argument 30 years. They may still be recovering from it. If they had used those picks correctly, there's no telling what they could have done. Moving over to the Jets, we have the 1969 divisional round versus Week 17 of 2015. The 1969 divisional round featured them going up against the eventual Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs, but the Chiefs did not play well in that game. The Jets had every opportunity to win, but Joe Namath was dreadful. He went 14 for 40 for only 164 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Snell and Boozer couldn't get going. Dawson wasn't great. He wasn't terrible. 12 for 27 for 201 yards and a touchdown. Mike Garrett was okay. The final score of the game was 13-6. Like I said, the Jets had every opportunity to win this game, but Gloucester freaking Richardson, a no-name, a schmagegi, a decent wide receiver, nothing great, catches a 19-yard pass from Len Dawson, sending the Chiefs to the AFL Championship game, where they beat the Raiders and would later beat the Vikings in the Super Bowl. It could have been the Jets. Week 17 of 2015, I remember this vividly. I had tickets to an Islander game. I gave them up because I wanted to watch the Jets clinch a playoff spot. They hadn't done it in 5 years. I had suffered through the Idzik years, the Tim Tebow year. I wanted to see my team clinch. And I figured there were other Islanders games. There weren't other Jets games. All the Jets had to do was beat a terrible Bills team. A Bills team that had nothing to play for. Or so we thought, as they were playing for pride. Rex Ryan was the Bills coach. You know he wanted to stick it to his old team. But that Bills team was bad. They were 7-8. And they were not playing like it. They were a bad football team. All the Jets had to do was win the game. Everyone was picking the Jets. Even though it was in Buffalo, the Jets were 3-point favorites. Instead, Ryan Fitzpatrick has one of the worst games of his career. 16 for 37 for 181 yards and 3 interceptions. All of them came in the fourth quarter. Think about that. Through 3 quarters, Fitzpatrick, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's having a really good game. He throws 3 straight interceptions on 3 straight drives. Single-handedly killing the Jets. The offensive game plan was dreadful. Chan Gailey was abysmal in that game. The Bills go on to beat the Jets 22-17. The Steelers beat the Browns, so the Steelers make it into the playoffs. Oh my God, I was furious. I almost threw a chair through my TV. That is worse than the 69 divisional round. At least the Jets in 69 lost to the eventual Super Bowl winning team. Granted, they didn't play like it, but they did go on to win the Super Bowl. They were a really good team. The 2015 Bills were not a good team. All the Jets had to do was win that game, and they're in the playoffs. God only knows what could happen. The last big game that the Jets have played in. Think about that for a second. Alright, this has been going on for a while. The last one we're going to do today is the Brooklyn Nets. We have the 2004 Eastern Conference semifinals versus the Nets trading Richard Jefferson. 2004, the Nets are coming off back-to-back NBA Finals appearances, and everyone is thinking this could be their year. The Lakers are dysfunctional. The Nets are playing really well. They were really good defensively that year. Their big four of Jason Kidd, Richard Jefferson, Kenyon Martin, and Kerry Kittles all played really well that year. Jason Collins' center was okay-ish. I'll get into him a little later. Their bench was good with Lucius Harris and Rodney Rogers. Like I said, a bunch of people were picking the Nets to win the whole thing. They destroy the Knicks in the first round. They sweep them. They go on to face the Detroit Pistons, a team that would eventually go on to win the NBA title. But this was a grit and grind Pistons team that, you know, they had a great defense, but were they really a great team? Were they really a great overall team? Their offense was 24th in the league. Now, granted, the Nets weren't much better, but they just played a really boring game. I mean, they weren't a fun team to watch. They didn't have any stars. Chauncey Billups, Richard Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, Rasheed Wallace, and Ben Wallace. Really good players, not great. The Nets should have beaten that team. Instead, They don't score 100 points in regulation in any game. There were 2 games, Game 1 and Game 7, where they didn't even break 70. The offense was abysmal. Richard Jefferson was really good. He killed Tayshaun Prince. Kenyon Martin was solid. But Jason Kidd was stifled by Chauncey Billups. Kerry Kittles was decent. I mean, Kittles did what you expected Kittles to do. Wasn't great, wasn't terrible. The biggest thing there was the centers. Ben Wallace destroyed Jason Collins in the low post. Center and point guard. That's why the Nets didn't win that series. But I think they were better than that team. And trading Richard Jefferson, this was absolutely terrible. I mean, I remember this trade, and I remember being so upset about it. I loved Richard Jefferson when he was with the Nets. He was my second favorite Net. It wasn't Vince Carter. It was Richard Jefferson. Really good scorer when he was with the Nets. Solid defensively. Homegrown Net. Yes, he wasn't picked by them, but it was a draft day trade, one of the worst in NBA draft history, not talked about. Eddie Griffin was sent to the Rockets in exchange for RJ, Jason Collins, and Brandon Armstrong. RJ has a really good career for the Nets. And late June 2008, it all comes to an end as he's traded for Yi Jianlian and Bobby Simmons. I don't remember what the thinking was behind that trade. Maybe it was because they didn't want to pay RJ anymore. But if that's the case, you have to do better than Jianlian and Simmons. Yi Jianlian is one of the biggest busts in, I don't know if I want to say recent NBA history. I mean, he was picked in 2007. He was a guy who was supposed to come in and follow in the Yao Ming mold, and he just wasn't that. Alright, he was soft, he didn't rebound, terrible player, and Bobby Simmons was an okay player, but nothing great. He couldn't fill the Richard Jefferson role, and that's what he was expected to do. Terrible trade, one of the worst in Nets history. That beats the 2004 Eastern Conference semifinals. Trading Richard Jefferson was worse. Like I said, if you lose to the team that eventually goes on to win a championship, you can only get so upset over it. Although, the one thing I'll say about the 2004 Pistons is, if you were to rank all the NBA title-winning teams, I think the Pistons would be close to the bottom. They weren't a great team. They were a great defensive team. There's a difference. They were not well-rounded. Alright, so that took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. I think what I'll do is, I'm not going to do the Superfecta today. I thought I was, but I'm not going to. I'm sorry. Maybe tomorrow, depending on what happens. Instead, I'll debut the other new semi-recurring segment. I love Hall of Faming. It's one of my favorite things to do. I can't tell you how many arguments I've had over it. I mean, the interview that I did with Tom Van Riper, I think is one of the best in the history of this show. And it's because we were both really passionate about the topic. You don't get that debate with any of the other Hall of Fames. The Basketball Hall of Fame we already know is a joke. The Pro Football Hall of Fame gets it right. And the Hockey Hall of Fame sometimes gets it wrong, but more often than not, the people who get in deserve it. They just have a big backlog of people that need to go in. But the Baseball Hall of Fame is the most controversial Hall of Fame there is. And people have always said, well, if this person's in the Hall of Fame, then we need to put all these people in. Well, my argument has been, just because we got it wrong once doesn't mean we need to do it again. Why are you piling on? It's not like we can take a crowbar to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Or can we? See, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go through everyone who's been inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, and you'll get one person per segment who I don't think should be in the Hall of Fame. When I'm done with that, I'm going to go through the list of people that I think should be in the Hall of Fame. By the end of it, we will have a correct Baseball Hall of Fame. So, I don't have a catchy name for this. It's time to go Hall of Faming. The first guy who I want to talk about is Morgan Bulkley. He was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in its second ever class. The 1936 class is one of the best classes in any Hall of Fame's history. Cobb, Ruth, Wagner, Mathewson, Walter Johnson. If you don't think that any of those guys should be in the Hall of Fame, you're dreaming. But the second year, they got it wrong. Everyone else who went in should have gotten in. But Morgan Bulkley? This guy was president of the National League for just 1 year. Its first year, 1876, alright? He's the answer to a good trivia question. But only 1 year. Its first long-term president was William Hulbert. He should be in the Hall of Fame. In fact, he is. You can't put a guy into the Hall of Fame who was just league president for 1 year. He also served on a really stupid committee. In 1905, Abraham Mills, a president of the league that preceded the National League, established a committee to determine who really invented baseball. And the way that they did this was they solicited responses from any American who had any knowledge of who really invented baseball. I mean, this wasn't fact-checked at all. And someone pulled out a man by the name of Abner Graves. This is all on Wikipedia, and it's really interesting. This is all correct. Graves said that Abner Doubleday, in 1839, invented baseball. It was originally derived from a game called Town Ball. Well, there's just one issue with that. Abner Doubleday was at West Point. Graves was never at West Point. I mean, if you're at West Point, you think you have time to invent baseball? Baseball was really invented in 1845 by Alexander Cartwright, but the Mills Commission erroneously credited Abner Doubleday for it. Bulkley was on this commission. It was terrible. They didn't do any fact-checking. I mean, if it was around today, it would be considered a joke, what they did. I'm not saying that anyone who was affiliated with that committee should be removed from the Hall of Fame, because George Wright definitely should be in the Hall of Fame. Really good player in his day, really good athlete. But there's no reason why Bulkley should be in the Hall of Fame. Let's take a metaphorical crowbar to his plaque. Alright, so that's going to do it for today. Maybe tomorrow you'll get the superfecta. I really don't know. I have no idea how this is going to work. because Decades of Dumbass Decisions took a lot longer than I thought it would. I think I'm going to leave it as a play-it-by-ear thing. Depending on how much time I have, and depending on how much sports news there is, you'll get the superfecta, or you'll get part of the superfecta. I do apologize for saying that you'd get it before when you're not going to, but it's new for me in doing these two semi-recurring segments. So, just bear with me. There are going to be some growing pains here. Yes, I spent a lot of time working on Decades of Dumbass Decisions, but I didn't know how long it would take me to explain everything. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that the safest place to be when I'm playing golf is on the fairway.